we have a motion, and some of these will be represented by alternatives as well, so we kind of double the experience depth. As I think you can appreciate, time does not allow us to spend time in individual introductions. So you've received this, you've all been named, and we'll keep this updated. You'll receive a full record of today's meeting and all meetings, and it will certainly include this information, which is current as of earlier today. So if you want to take a quick scan there, I'm sure you'll see a lot of familiar
names.
names.
Number, whether they're going to be in a position where their home, because they can't pay their mortgage, or the millions of people are going to...
I think we might have been picking up someone's president. And here we go. So we would like to ask you, with the backdrop of this commission membership, and this is as much to make sure our platform is working. One can't take these things for granted, but we are going to ask commission members only to go back up to the live link at the top of the chat. Tap on that. It will take you to Mentimeter. You don't need a code. And when you do so, you will be presented with your browser with an open canvas. And we simply want to invite you to weigh in briefly, and you may answer as many times as time permits, but to you and to those you represent, what are the most important benefits? We just thought it might be a nice way to get the whole process started of looking at this lifeblood, as the Secretary put it, this vascular network. And I'm glad to see the session's working.
Paul, the meeting chat link may not have come through when we switched meeting platforms.
I put it on this one, Dave. I can do it again because I have it sort of in my memory, if you will, but I did see it in this one. Let me try it again, though, just to be sure, okay? See if it pops up as the most recent. You might just have to go so far back in chat it didn't show up. Did you get it there, Dave?
Got it now, yep.
Okay. Good to hear a familiar voice.
Likewise.
Some of us have just gotten contact here.
Okay, Tim. What we're doing is a little open sourcing here of ideas about your thoughts and those you represent as to the benefits of transportation. So if you see the link in the chat feature, and it has a picture of somebody holding a cell phone, so it should sort of jump out at you visually. It's a very recent chat. There's only one item after it. You can actually just click on that live link, and you'll be given, by opening in your browser, the opportunity to enter, and this is for commission members only, to enter that information.
I am not a commission member.
Okay, well then, I'm sorry to say, if we had to do this combined meeting, there will be other mechanisms for input, but in this meeting we're inviting just commission members to weigh in. That's okay. I'll let you recover on where the input mechanism was. Thank you.
Have I just been disinvited, or?
Now, I'm sorry, that the public is invited to the meetings. They are certainly open meetings. We had anticipated having a platform that would allow commission members to start doing some of their process work and for the public to observe that. Given our little mix-up with the technology, everybody kind of followed the same link. So we're just inviting people on the honor system to participate as members. Thank you. All are invited. We do see a rich set of ideas coming in. see multi-modes represented. This will give us an opportunity to find some groupings of this information and really begin to build a base that really gets at the spirit of the importance of transportation, though we will talk a lot of dollars and cents and infrastructure and iron and concrete and trails, but this gives us more of the real spirit of what transportation allows and provides to all of us as Pennsylvanians.
Paul, you'll need to look at your text for one logistical item.
Now.
And I will start recording now that I've stopped talking, and we're going to start getting more input. Thank you, Keith. Wasn't originally in our plan. Good reminder. So folks, we will provide this in follow-up. I don't want to make you dizzy, but I'm going to just do a gentle scroll back up to the top so that you can take a look. We can't track who said what. There are different colors around this just so you can see them. It's just really a kind of expanded chat feature. Makes it a little easier on the eyes, I think. Some people really jumped into this with some of the things we so much depend upon: sense of community, emergency services, economic growth, trails among my favorite, jobs, access, tourism, and livelihood. So that is not by any means a full measure of what transportation does, but I think our platform is working reliably. I'll advance that to another one in a little while, but I'd like to just jump us right back to our program and talk a bit about the charge. So your charge, and I'm sure you read it as you received it, but it is just really boiling it down to these three principal points: that it's a proposal for addressing transportation funding, comprehensive and strategic. We're looking out over the horizon. We're taking stock of what's here now and really making the best effort to round up perhaps a portfolio approach to that strategic revenue opportunity. There are some other elements: keeping the governor, the recommendations in front of the governor's team. So we'll kind of do an interim report as we go. It's a pretty short burn cycle. We're talking about a final report that has to come together, and we're barely into August 1. So as we look ahead, and I'll do a schedule later in the session, but most of the deliberation is probably going to happen even before July, so that during July, the work of compiling and crystallizing the recommendations can take place. That is the game plan as it stands as we set out on this journey together. So, as promised just a moment ago, I do have another interaction for you, and I'll advance from the one we had before. Thank you for the great ideas. And this kind of looks at it from the other side, looks at the challenge from the other side, and asks, from your perspective, again, commission members only, please, what would be the consequences of not addressing the challenge in transportation funding? And we're all well aware of the challenge. We'll get into its magnitude in a short while. What would happen if we did not, if it were not addressed? Coming at it from the negative side here, I'm sorry to say, but just for a short while. This is kind of the virtual version of small talk, folks, in the lobby before you get started on a meeting.
Paul, did you begin the recording?
I did. And I have an affirmation of the confirmation of that on my screen. So I think we're fine. Thanks for the reminder.
We appreciate seeing some of these responses extending beyond transportation to the economy and public health, emergency management, agriculture. Appreciate you looking at it so broadly.
I'm just going to scroll up very slowly. Though I almost can't keep up with the input. We'll just give that one another half minute. Some of you are quite quick typists. And that will actually stay open a little bit after we move on. If you are not seeing, I'm keeping an eye on the chat as best I can, you may have an option to advance the slide in Mentimeter, Shauna and others, but there may be something, and you may have to just check through your browser. There might be something that generally it says advance to next question. In the absence of that, and this has been very reliable for me and thousands of uses, individuals using it, you may enter ideas into chat as well if you just find that there's a lack of linkage there. And I'll leave that question open. I don't want to cut off anyone who is thoughtful and typing, but I'll jump us back and talk a little bit about what the product of your efforts may look like. So we have to formulate a set of recommendations. So what all will that entail? And this is not by any means fully decided. It is up to the commission to go through its efforts to determine what this needs to look like. An executive summary kind of leading it off, or potentially as a separate component of your deliverables, if you will. Probably appropriate to have a message from the chair just addressing kind of the questions we've looked at even already. You know, what really is at stake? A TROC overview, its purpose, its evaluation, its establishment. The big ones are really 4, 5, and 6. So the needs, the challenges to funding, a little bit of a look back at the historical perspective and what has been done to maintain a level of funding to match the need. And of course, we will talk about gaps in that equation. And really the options and the evaluation framework, the mechanisms by which you've generated ideas and what those ideas are and where you come down on them. And there'll be some formality to your adoption of those options in moving forward. So it ends with those recommendations and the rationale and a conclusion. So not by any means decided, but we just thought it would be helpful to give some shape to the kind of documentation that would really memorialize the efforts of the TROC. That starts to roll off the tongue after a while of saying it, the TROC there. So we will step now into a funding review, and this is a time where we'll look at a good bit of data. Commission members have received information. A lot of it, as I indicated earlier, was distilled into one-pagers. There's a lot of other information available. There will be a resource account set up so that we have easy access and a conduit of information flow. But we also thought it appropriate now to help build a kind of common knowledge level. And we actually started out with something the department has used in some other presentations to just maybe set the stage. When you give some consideration to what you spend and just kind of working with some average numbers here, the big one in the middle is that thing that gets attached to our hands or our ears. But when you kind of look at utilities and the services you receive at the low end of the scale by a long shot, including both state and federal components, is that gas tax, those kinds of averages. So as we step into this, we're just kind of putting in perspective what people pay, indeed, for the services or the results of the services provided. When we look at the budget, sort of writ large here, we look out, and I'm going to just stay at a fairly high level and invite Keith to talk in a little bit more detail. And we'll just spend a few minutes on each of these slides. The big green bar, the highway, about 62% of the department's budget, multimodal together, 25%, lots of other things going on account for some 13%. The items on the left and right side here just put in perspective, where's that money going? It's going into the 40,000 miles of roadway, the 25,000 plus bridges, 10 million licensed drivers, ID holders served, 12 million vehicles registered. And then kind of on the other side, 125 airports. Don't forget the 53 transit systems. Railroads, it's 65. The operating railroads numbers higher than I expected or knew. 3 big water ports in the Commonwealth. So it's just beginning from a very big picture perspective to kind of work our arms around what is that budget supporting.
And Paul, if you would go back to the previous slide for a moment, one thing I would like to point out to the commission, the gas tax on the right actually does consist of both the federal and the state gas tax that you pay at the pump. So you may have looked at that and thought, well, that's only state or only federal. It is indeed both. Thank you, Paul. If you can go forward, please. So as we look at this PennDOT budget, one impression we would like to remind all ourselves of is that PennDOT and Pennsylvania Transportation is a mega business by any measure. And I would just point out a few examples of that in terms of the diversity of the business lines that PennDOT is in. As we look at the highway, we're reminded that there are payments to local government, which manage an enormous number of bridges and 78,000 miles of roadway. And then under multimodal, PennDOT is one of the most aggressive and progressive organizations in the state in terms of really being a DOT, Department of Transportation, in not just name only, but in mission and reality, that we are supporting a well-functioning multimodal system. Finally, what I would want to note here and draw to your attention is what some of us might call mission creep. And that's a challenge for any organization. And we all value our Pennsylvania State Police very highly. But remember that a large expenditure occurs from the motor license fund for the Pennsylvania State Police. And if you look at the former work of the Transportation Advisory Committee, that's not the case in every state. So we do pay for Pennsylvania State Police. Okay.
Thank you, Keith. I think someone might have inadvertently stolen my screen, but I've grabbed it back. So I think you should all still be seeing seeing our budget there. Might have seen someone's email feed. Somebody has a busy day ahead. If we turn the corner, and I do see the items coming in from chat, we're not going to necessarily task ourselves to answer every one as it comes up, but we do encourage you to continue to enter ideas, and we'll do some resourcing of that as we move forward. We'll get some help from the department. So thank you. So when you look at the current funding sources, where is that money coming from? When you take a look at the big one, bottom right, the Pennsylvania Motor License Fund, obviously, we are all familiar with that. And just kind of jumping around a little bit, The Federal Highway Trust Fund for Highway and Bridge is some 22% of that funding. And next in line, before a pretty big drop off, is the Pennsylvania Public Transportation Trust Fund. So they're kind of the big three. And then you're really down to items that provide a lot of money, but against the backdrop of $8.6 billion, doesn't appear so much when you look at it on a percentage basis.
And our mission as a commission is extremely challenging because we're focused on that primarily on that large green portion of the pie, replacement revenues related primarily to the motor license fund. So this particular slide should give us all a very sober reminder of the great challenge and opportunity we have in the months ahead, but very much a challenge.
Thank you, Keith. The department has worked from a time many years ago where its complement was above 20,000 to now below 12,000 to be efficient. And a great deal of effort has been put into streamlining operations, into making sure that there is a payback, there's a return on investment from the wise use of those resources. Some of the highlights of that, and there are really many, some $38.5 million across a 3-year period for lower cost materials on secondary roads. Effective, useful, but lower in cost. $10 million over a 5-year period by efficiency improvements that employees have come up with. So there's a Work Smart program, Idea Link. There is the ongoing encouragement that those of you closest to the work have ideas about how to do it better, how to streamline processes, how to save money. A big one at $49 million over a 4-year period for the county accreditation program. P3 is obviously an enormous initiative. It let 558 bridge projects and addressed some 6,000 in 2008, brought that number down to 2,500 for poor condition. So a big step taken to address some of these major infrastructure components.
Paul, all I would add here, I think all of us know in any organization we've ever been a part of, and even in our own home budget, efficiencies and innovation are essential. It's something we keep our eye on all the time, but it only takes you so far. There are a tremendous amount of underlying needs that we're going to look at soon. And the efficiencies and innovation are a commitment of the department. Those will continue, but they are not an answer alone. They're part of the solution, but the pie has to increase as well.
Thank you, Keith. One of the initiatives is Penndot Pathways. So in a little greater detail, Penndot Pathways looked at what is called the PEL, the Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, looking at funding solutions to support Pennsylvania pathways, getting around mobility in Pennsylvania through stable, dedicated funding, finding things that are sustainable for the long run, looking at the kind of mid to long term, and you have to have a pretty long horizon on some of these things. Those things under exploration for future initiatives are things like managed lanes and congestion pricing, tolling of corridors, not unfamiliar to people on this in this session, surely, charges to road users, and fee and tax increases. We will take a look at some of those in a little while. A near-term solution was that of bridge tolling. So looking at creating this ability to toll through P3 those that are authorized by the P3 board to be tolled. Those include methodologies to ensure environmental justice, watching where the routes go through diversion and mitigation of problems that might emerge from that. So Penndot Pathways has in some ways already put a foot forward, and its work provides some of the analytical basis which we can use to begin to evaluate what this commission should put forward as its recommendations.
For me, Paul, this picture is a positive one because I've been watching over the years a funding structure that once worked and now is somewhat of a dinosaur, a funding structure that's antiquated. And often government is criticized of kicking a problem down the road. And now we're looking at a problem that we're not kicking down the road. We're looking at it with the commission and through the Penndot Pathways initiative already underway in terms of stewardship and leadership to address these problems head on now, as difficult as it may be, rather than it being nearly impossible at some point in the future. We are very glad to make the reference here to alternative funding approaches identified for implementation. And that, by and large, is the mission of the TROC Commission.
Thank you, Keith. I think I got my screen back again. Don't make me slap your fingers when you go for my screen. So the need is laid out on this slide in really big picture terms, right? So if you look at the green of the bar, it's the 8.6 million annual budget, the current annual budget, 3/4 of which is state funding and 1/4 is federal. That's that $8.6 million you're going to be very familiar with for the 2021-22 fiscal year. What has been identified above and beyond that funding gap, which increases yearly, is some $9.35 billion. All told, that tall column there could be rounded to $18 billion, so $17.95 billion. It's that needed annual budget, building in increases for inflation, but direct actual costs required to address the challenges that, or begin to address the challenges you have been tasked to address, to keep that whole transportation system working properly. So that is a look at the need. The need breaks down in this manner. So the big piece on the right side for highway maintenance, its operations, repairs outside of the NHS, the National Highway System, some $4.1 billion. That's what we have out here. The next piece of that to look at is just opposite at the highways, interstate, and other national highway systems. That's another $2.1 billion, and it's termed or characterized not as overhauls, but as modest improvements, followed by 1.9 in system repairs for highways and 1.2 across the multimodal network, all elements of it, and they are broken down there. Now, this is certainly a lot of information all at once, but we did want to take a little measure here of what is it that makes up, and there's a lot of background information, a lot of analysis that squares with that 9.35 billion, and that's the unfunded need. So if you were taking a look at the entirety of the issue, and I'm going to backspace just for a moment, that's that 17.95, and even the 8.6 billion, that funding that has been done is in some cases likely to decrease for reasons that we will explore certainly as a commission and briefly even today. So not even all of that is 100% solid. Okay. So that need, nearly 3/4 of the highway bridge funding is from the federal and state gas tax revenue. So that obviously was the headline in the executive order. It's not the entirety of the charge to the TROC. The picture on the right helps characterize just some of the challenge we face in a state with 40,000 miles, with freeze-thaw cycles, with climate situations that we'll have to deal with. And it's just a dramatic portrayal of some of what happens out there on this valuable asset.
Paul, this would be a good place to remind the commission that 70% of the department's revenue sources do not increase with inflation. I think that may actually be part of the build of this slide. 70% don't increase with inflation. And probably a good point for all of us to think about Pennsylvania's transportation system as compared to other states. It's vast, it's extensive, it gets snow, it gets ice. There are other states with smaller systems and much larger populations and revenue bases. We have a tremendous challenge in terms of a need presently under the current arrangements. And then when we look at replacing revenue sources that are becoming defunct or antiquated, the problem is substantial. Keep in mind Pennsylvania's system as you do compare it to other states. It's larger than most of the New England system combined. And we look at other states. I tend to think of Florida often, that there's 8 million more people. There are many visitors. There's a lot of revenue associated with that, and generally a much smaller state system than Pennsylvania has, as I recall the numbers.
I just want to acknowledge and thank people for their thoughtful questions and comments in the chat. It is an open feature to continue to use. I hope you'll understand I won't shoot from the hip and answer those things, but we have quite a team that will definitely help us round up answers to your thoughtful questions. So our challenge ahead is making a difference. So the commission is clearly charged with taking some bite out of, and that's why we graded the green above the 8.6 billion. And as I remind myself, even not all of the 8.6 billion, when we really get into the detail, is assured in the sense that there are elements of that also erode over time. We'll get into that as we move forward, but saying that that's 8.6 billion, and the upper side of that is the additional 9.35 billion. In materials provided to the commission, the department has identified rather immediate, urgent needs totaling on the order of $2.9 billion. So if the commission takes its charge and sort of evaluates, where should we end up? What should our recommendations account for of that lighter green sort of shaded block, knowing that the department has already identified, and again, we'll go into this in some detail as we move forward, some 2.9 above that 8.6 number. Where should we end up? So if we reflect on the work of the commission and what we have to do in moving forward, it's a lot of work. There are two kinds of work that I think the commission is going to carry out. One is very analytical. We're going to consider the realities of the funding gap. We're going to look ahead to doing some analytical work, but also some exploratory work. Analytically, what really are those unmet needs? Some of the questions popping up in chat begin to get at that. There will undoubtedly be much greater detail required than we're covering today to really put those needs in the proper perspective. It's a complex equation. You're going to get it. You're going to get into that. With that level of understanding, though, you're going to be in position to start to explore. You might challenge some assumptions. You might question the status quo. You're looking for options and alternatives to address really both short-term and long-term needs. So it's a bit difficult right now to know where you ought to end up. And I guess I could be charged with asking a rather unfair question of the commission. But some of you have probably given some thought to, now that I'm on this commission, now that I am a steward of this asset, how much of that gap do you think we're going to be able to reflect in revenue alternatives, revenue options? Kind of a difficult question. As you look at it, where would you eye it up? Would you put your number at the top level of the 9.35? Would you cover that 2.9 that's been identified? So in a manner that is by no means official or binding in any way, because some of you have already given a lot of thought to this, you might have your thoughts on it. We thought it might be helpful to get a sense of, even if it is a diversity of opinion of committee members, and we took that column there that starts at the 8.6 and goes up to the, may I call it 18 billion, we turned it on its side. We didn't have much choice because of this input device. So we want to invite committee members, commission members, to just say where they think, we don't know who said what, where they think we ought to end up between the almost 9 and the 18 billion, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. We'll get some other input on it. So in your Mentimeter, you can just slide that. We'll get the averages, and we'll get a chance to look back at this, possibly in a few months, and say, well, here's where we started, something of an anchor number. Maybe understand the diversity of opinion of the group. If you have no idea, we understand that. You can even hit skip. It's a way of saying, I know there's something out there we need to do, but I'm just not ready to, and you're not on record by any means anyway, but you're allowed to skip if you get faint of heart about that. Kurt, as we enter this, I was notified your hand was up. I don't know if that was intentional, but I certainly wouldn't want to cut you off. I don't see that. Maybe not. So you can put your number in and you can watch whether things move in relation to the new entries that come in. We'll just give this another half a minute. Something that's been helpful in the use of this tool in my work is it's not the average that matters. It's kind of where it came from. Some of us are thinking about going all the way to the right, getting up at that 17.9. Others are thinking, maybe there's a much smaller chunk. Some people skipped, but I guess mode is sort of here right around where that 13.9, our current average, is quite a few people there. So this is just kind of it's just a way of sounding the waters and getting a sense of, if you will, the appetite for the work of the commission. And that may certainly change. Some of you up at the one end may come down. Some of you down at the lower end may come up, and some of you may stay right where you started. But it gives us a chance to just find that there is work to do, and there certainly is work toward consensus and ultimately the more formal process of adopting the recommendations that you will come up with. So I'm going to close that one, and I'm going to pop it open to a more open-ended question, because again, I'm acknowledging that that was a little bit of an unfair question, but thank you for participating in it. And it really is an opening for you in the circumstances we have today with so many people in the session to maybe register some concerns or even opportunities that you think. So any concerns you have about this from any perspective whatsoever, policy perspective, economic development perspective, just put some ideas in there for us. It's going to help us chart out the work we have to do to bring people to a common understanding. And if your slide hasn't advanced from the slider, just see if there's a little spot on there that'll tell you how to do it. And I certainly acknowledge the challenge of without the detail. That's why I said it is a little bit of an unfair question, but I appreciate your being game to give it a try. I'll keep this visible for another minute or so. I think we're doing pretty well at making up for a little bit of lost time at the beginning of our session, but we're not doing too badly. Thank you, folks. You're pulling us through. Great concerns and opportunities, definitely some understanding of the need to look deeper at these things, and that's going to be some of the hard work ahead. So I'm going to stop showing that, but it won't stop the input process. That will still be up and running. We're going to turn the corner, and we did this exercise with the slider and those ideas before even getting into these funding options. But there's a lot of information available about some of the funding options out there, raising certain things, instituting certain things, and so forth. This is a lot of information to pop up on a screen at you, but I thought if we just helped characterize this, you could do deeper analysis later, and I'll just kind of bring some forward. As an example, a big one from the general transportation is that a vehicle registration fee increases. You know, if you went 100%, so if you doubled or tripled it, you would see on the order of $750 million to $1.5 billion. Just going to be a quick sampling here of some opportunities, potentially. If you took a look at the vehicle sales tax and went with an increase of somewhere approaching let's say around 2%, you'd see somewhere on the order of $450 million to $500 million in increase from that. Still in that header of general transportation fund, much, much smaller number, but because it's on our minds, what about the electric car fee? Those whose gas tax evaporated. So maybe an institution of $150 to $200 general fee. What does that really bring? It just helps us get a sort of order of magnitude understanding of these different inputs and possibilities. That's on the order of 5 to 10, just to round it out, $1 million. Then you start exploring the use-based considerations. Now, some big numbers here. If you took new road user charge of $3.16 to 7 cents per mile, you're looking at somewhere on the order of 3.8 billion to 8.4 billion, right? So that's saying that current gas equivalent comes from, it's about $3.16, pardon me, 3.16 cents to 7 cents. So a little more than doubling it. You're seeing some 3.8 to 8.4 billion dollars. The full tolling, if you went with a statewide tolling of interstates, that's somewhere on the order of 1.8 to 2.9 billion dollars. Nobody's saying we're doing these things. We're just sampling some of the alternatives out there that have been discovered or that have been explored. Congestion pricing is a new thought process of some tolling of interstates and expressways in the metropolitan areas, coming in at some $500 million to close to $1 billion there. At the state level, the funding options really are divided between traditional revenue sources, and they're all kind of in the same ballpark when you look at the money, in that $200–300 million, from an increase in corporate income tax to an increase in personal income tax, sales tax, or even real estate transfer taxes. So just giving you a kind of roster or inventory of those opportunities. Those things that would require no legislation, working on the driver's license, the photo fee, raise the fee by $2, $6 million comes back. Real ID fee from 30 to 60, 125 million. So these are just some samplings and maybe giving you a sense of order of magnitude of what different approaches may bring back, may yield. If you did it all, you could generate sufficient additional revenue to fully address. I guess it's a pretty important bottom line for me not to skip. If you did them all, nobody's saying that the commission is here to do them all, but it's out there. The money is out there. It's in a lot of different areas. There are also local level funding options. And just as you look at this, the left side is more of the high end. And I always have to sort of adjust my view of that. So the big money is kind of in the left column and less so as you move to the right in statewide legislation allowing these local funding options to be implemented. We won't quiz you on that. It's a lot to throw at you. We're going to share additional information in following up. That was a really quick tour of the funding, the gap, some potential areas of opportunity in making up the difference. As we go about our work and we consider the T-ROC and how it organizes, one of the possibilities is that in some of our meetings and going forward, technology working for us, we'll have some breakouts. Right? We're going to bite that off. We might have half-hour breakout sessions in a 2-hour meeting, for instance. One way that immediately comes to mind to start to drill down, maybe spread the work around a little bit, is to go by a rather traditional approach, kind of break it down by highway and bridge, public transportation and passenger rail, that they fit together well, all other multimodal, and the local transportation network. That would result in sort of 4 breakout possibilities. We're not in a position to impose this model on the commission right now, but we thought it might be helpful to say in some of our deliberations, might just be good to kind of group up, by mode, by focus area. There are probably ways to do this that we have not thought of. So if we have you work on the mentee side, and I'm going to pop over here and this was our last question. Concerns or opportunities to be considered. I'm just showing you how much we got. Now I'll advance the slide to our next question. Maybe you have a model in mind, maybe you don't, for how the commission might maybe work in some focus areas, different from the sort of 4-part breakdown that we shared just a few moments ago. So if anybody has any ideas there, that's why we wanted to open the floor to your thoughts about other ways to approach your task. We have some others in the back of our minds as well, but we just showed you one. Keep the creative ideas flowing and we'll have a lot to sort out, but that's the way we like it. Thank you, folks. And really specifically here, just if you can think of a kind of framework, if you will, for diving deep, and it may only be in the meetings, maybe a little bit of front end reading you do, by all means, share it with us. And if you want to go at it by revenue source or you want to go at it by, general categories of revenue source, we can mix and match those things as well. But we can use all these ideas, so don't hold them back.
Mhm. Interesting.
Some of these address the sort of primary question at hand, the kind of framework, like maybe even by region. And some of them are just great ideas for us to plug into the general considerations of the commission. And we appreciate both sides of that. Yeah, maybe do the research, then split by mode or innovative methods, national models. Good stuff. We want the collective work to be greater than the sum of its parts, I guess. As a consultant, I have to say things like synergy once a day. So we really want the commission to be able to use its work together to be efficient. And I'm really reading into some of these ideas, some great, this one just grabbed me that, maybe there is that sort of divide, do the research, and then pop up the innovative finance opportunities and so forth from other states. So.
Yeah.
And I've got to keep us moving because I'm going to keep us on track with time. And you did go to Menzie. That's still open. Didn't shut it off. A lot of work here for the department as well. As you can tell, the department's done a lot of work to get us to this point in a really short period of time. So we greatly appreciate that from our side as facilitators. It will continue. The department will continue to work toward giving us data, analytical support, the very things you're asking for in chat and elsewhere here, as well that modal subject matter expertise, right? So we can bring the subject matter expertise to bear. We'll help set up the meetings and facilitate and record keep and follow up and manage the schedule. And of course, the communications, logistics, and ultimately pull together that final report. So you don't have to get into the dirty work. You got to have the big thoughts. You have to think the great ideas, get into the mix, help with the debate, help with the deliberations, and then let the department really kind of pull that stuff together as we move forward, which leads to commission member roles. And I don't think any of these are going to be big surprises to you, but we want to hear perspectives from where it's how we started today, organizations, sectors you represent, your stakeholders, giving us information, suggestions, challenging and questioning, and really be somewhat objective stewards of these assets to evaluate the options objectively and the recommendations as well. All wired into that is providing the recommendations. Stand out and propose some ideas. We'll take it and help us look for the feasibility, equity, the effectiveness of those possibilities. We're going to really work to represent the interests of all the sectors and stakeholders. We have public folks on our call today. They want good representation across the board. We owe it to all of Pennsylvania to do that. So participate actively in this problem solving. We're going to work toward consensus and be good stewards and give us that wide range. So knowing what it's like to work in a large group, and it is a large group, we thought we might just source you for a few moments on thoughts about a charter that includes guiding principles. So it's real easy to get it started. We'll put the executive order and a charge together. We'll have you sign off on it. But guiding principles, think of them as kind of ground rules for the work of the commission itself. So we just want to get your thoughts in case there's anything we should really know about going into this. You've probably been through it before. Think of it as a quick, just to about 90 seconds on any ground rules you think the commission ought to observe. We might elevate that and call it guiding principles for the charter. But anything you think is really critical as we work together individually and collectively. We can certainly tap some other work from the past, but we just want to get a quick crowdsourcing of ground rules. Folks, you're answering the challenge of making up the time that we lost at the beginning, and I greatly appreciate it. So you can keep entering, but I just want to give you just a couple last shots here. Activities by month, what we really see, and then the commission's going to decide this ultimately, is in March as we round out the month, initiate the proposal, really getting our arms around the need. April's about generating and evaluating options. So we really have to get into that pretty much right away. It's right out there in front of us, and really identify those initial recommendations around about May, if you will. June's got to be bringing it together, complete the recommendations, build out the rationale, other sections of the strategic proposal. This has got to be sound leading to July, pulling it together, revising it, finalizing it, and you might as well call it the end of July, but August 1 submission to the governor. We think it's going to take a couple of meetings a month of a few hours each. Our game plan going in, and we're going to evaluate everything that's come out of today's rapid fire session, but we really want to anticipate getting together twice a month for 2 hours at a time, knowing that we might have some breakouts within that to really kind of do our best to be productive. We'll take a look at the frequency and duration, although I did just roll that out, and the structure. And of course, there will always be a public attendance. They're not going to participate in decision making, but a public attendance element of this process. And so the Menti that's open now, I'm just going to leave open, if you will, rather indefinitely. Got great ideas here on the principles. I appreciate that. I'm going to advance it as a kind of collect-all, just a last call. Other challenges, opportunities you see, something you haven't said yet but want to, concerns, that's okay. I'll leave that open, and you can put in anything that you might have there. But our follow-up will be a summary of today's meeting schedule through July, and then, kind of a quick look, an initial look at options and focus areas, and even screening considerations, those criteria for decision making. I'm about a half minute over, and for that I really apologize, but I will leave that Menti open, and I will invite our commission chair, Secretary Gramian, to have the final word. Secretary. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Again, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for attending this session today. I know we shared a lot of information with you, and it's a lot to absorb in an hour and a half. Please take a look at the documents that you received. Feel free to share some of the thoughts that you didn't have a chance to share with us through communications, other emails, Menti, or sending us emails. This is going to be your Transportation Revenue Option Commission. We want everyone's participation. We want everyone's feedback. We are going to work together to come up with a solution for our transportation funding. And this is your plan. This is your funding plan. And we're looking forward to working together with you until we put the report together by August 1st. We're available to address any questions, any comments you have, any additional information. I noticed I was reading the chat. There were some comments that were posted on the chat with regards to maybe some backup documents for the information we presented to you. We will review all the comments on the chat. We will address it. And again, thank you so much for participation today. And we are looking forward to our next session. And Paul and Keith, great job with running the sessions and facilitating the discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Secretary. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Secretary.